Quinoa is one of my favourite foods. I eat it very regularly, and it's great for vegetarians, vegans and meat eaters alike. Very tasty, really easy to put into a lot of different recipes. Inquiring minds wanted to know the scoop on quinoa. What is it? Why is it good for you? Where can you get it? How do you cook it? What does it taste like? What can you use it in? And today I'm going to give you the answer to all of those questions. Quinoa was first cultivated by the Incas, and it's actually a seed. It's related to spinach and beet. But it does behave more like a grain, which is why it's so great to cook with, really versatile and can be used in a number of different ways. So why quinoa? Firstly, quinoa is naturally gluten-free, so for those of you who are trying to live a gluten-free lifestyle, whether you are gluten intolerant or you're just trying to cut out wheat and gluten as much as you can, quinoa is a really versatile alternative to a lot of other foods that you might have been eating before. If you don't care about gluten, that's fine too. Quinoa is a complex carbohydrate, which is the best kind of carbohydrate, and it's low on the glycemic index, so it keeps your blood sugar stable, keeps you fuller for longer and won't cause those nasty spikes. Complex carbohydrates and low glycemic index food are also really good if you're trying to maintain weight, manage your weight, lose weight, or just stay in shape. Another good thing about quinoa is that it's alkaline forming, which means that it puts your body into a slightly alkaline state. It's not hugely alkaline forming, but it is more so than rice and grains and things that it would be replacing. Try saying alkaline forming 20 times as fast as you can. Your body works best when it's in a slightly more alkaline state. When you eat too much acidic food and tip your body too far over to the other side, you can get things like ulcers, and your hair looks dry and brittle and your skin is dry. Overall, you just have less energy and you are more prone to getting things like colds and flus and feeling a bit under the weather. It's recommended that people eat a split of 60-40 in favour of more alkaline forming foods, so it's just another reason why quinoa is a really great food to eat. Aside from being alkaline forming, a complex carbohydrate and low in the glycemic index, quinoa is also an amazing source of protein. Taking you back in time to the last time you sat in a science class, which might be longer ago for some of you than others, including me. If you're paying attention in those science classes, you'll remember that proteins are made up of amino acids. 12 of those amino acids are actually made in your body, by your body, and it's doing it by itself. It's fine. But there are 9 other amino acids that you need that come from the food that you eat. If you think of the amino acids like Lego, they come together to form the protein that your body needs. So if certain foods have certain amino acids, other foods have other amino acids, and you eat a combination of different foods, you will be able to put the building blocks together and your body will have the protein that it needs. There are some foods though which have all 9 of the amino acids that we need, and they're called complete proteins. Things like dairy, eggs, seafood and poultry are examples of complete amino acids. But if you're vegan or you're a vegetarian who doesn't eat a lot of dairy or eggs just every once in a while, then quinoa is the food for you, because this is actually a complete protein. It's not the hardest thing in the world to combine different sources of food to put together the proteins if you're vegan, but it is really handy to know that this is a source of complete protein. You know that you can eat this and get the amino acids that you need. You don't have to be a vegan or a vegetarian to feel the benefits though, because we can all do with those amino acids every once in a while. Even if you're not a vegetarian, you still might not be getting all the amino acids that you really need. Fun fact for you, I like to have a bit of fun with people, and when I tell people that I'm vegetarian and they say, but what do you do to get your protein? Do you get enough protein? Are you sure you're getting enough protein? I ask them which amino acid they're referring to and it usually shuts them up. So now that we know why quinoa is so fabulous, when do you eat it and what can it be used for? Because quinoa alone doesn't have a remarkable taste or a strong flavour to it, it means it's incredibly versatile. So consider it like rice. You can use rice in many different ways. You can have it in savoury situations and also sweet situations, like you would just have rice pudding. I tend to eat quinoa in more savoury situations, and I pretty much completely replace rice with quinoa in most of my diet. So if I'm having chili, I'll have it as the rice with chili. I'll have it inside burritos. I'll have it in a biryani instead of rice. And I also like to sprinkle it into soups if I want to make them a little bit more hearty and filling, or put it on top of salads. You can even cook it with scrambled eggs. It's really delicious. And going back to the more sweet side of the spectrum, you can also cook it in some almond milk or water or a combination of both and have it as a replacement for oatmeal as well. It works really well that way. You can bake with it. I've seen recipes for quinoa muffins and quinoa cupcakes alike. It's really very versatile. You can buy quinoa in 2 varieties, red and white, or sometimes you can get a mixture of both. I just tend to buy the white variety because that's what I find most available near me, but go wild, try both and see which one you prefer. So now that you know why quinoa is so great and you know what kind of dishes you can use it in, I'm going to show you a fail-safe way to prepare it. First, we're going to go ahead and measure out the quinoa so we know how much water we need to cook it with. I'm using 1 cup. If you use half of this or if you double it, make sure to adjust the water accordingly. Then we're going to rinse and do more rinsing because quinoa actually has a really bitter coating called saponins, and this stops birds from eating it when it's in the wild. It's just naturally bitter and we want to get that off or it's going to taste funky. So keep rinsing, it might take a while, and when the soapy suds have started to go away, that's when your quinoa is ready to cook and be used. Then you want to shake it off and get the excess water out of there, and then you can go ahead and transfer it into the pan that you're going to be using. Then we want to add the water. Now most people will tell you to add double the amount of water to quinoa, so 2 cups. But you'll notice that the second cup that I add isn't completely full. I do just over 1.5 cups, and that's because personally I feel like it works best after having cooked quinoa quite a few times. I'm going to add this to the heat, and if it does dry out we can always add more water, but usually just over 1.5 cups is perfect for me. This is when I add my secret weapon, which is a bouillon powder. You can use stock, but I prefer to use this low sodium version because I can add salt at the end if I want, and I can control how much goes in there. So I usually add about half a tablespoon of this to the mix, and then I just make sure that that's all stirred in and evenly coating the quinoa. And then you want to leave your quinoa on the boil, and we're just going to wait until that heats up. Because quinoa is so bland, you really need something like this to give it a little bit of flavour, and I think if people don't like quinoa or they haven't liked it in the past, you should definitely try seasoning it and giving it another go because it makes the world of difference. When your quinoa has reached a rolling boil, we're just going to keep this going and let that heat up. We're going to leave it like this for a minute or so and just make sure we're stirring it and that it's all cooking evenly and the quinoa is getting nice and hot and starting the cooking process. This is when we want to cover the quinoa up. We're going to put a lid on this and we're going to take the temperature down from a really high temperature where it was boiling down to a really low temperature, and we're going to just leave it here for a couple of minutes. I usually stay in the kitchen. I'll just get on with some other things that I need to do just so I can keep an eye on it, and we're just going to leave that on a low heat simmering away for a bit longer. You can see that the quinoa has already started to absorb the water, and this is where I do things a little bit differently and I have my own technique for this. I actually take it completely off the heat at this point and I cover it up, just leave it for a few minutes to soak up and see what happens. Sometimes I don't have to put it back on the heat after this and it absorbs all the water. Other times it's a little bit different. This time you can see that it isn't completely absorbed, and so we can just put it back on a gentle low heat, which is what I'm doing now. I really think that by leaving it to sit for a little bit in between, you really do avoid the overcooking and kind of getting the quinoa stuck to the bottom of the pan, and personally this works out really well for me, and then I just heat it up again a little bit at the end. After a couple more minutes you will see that the quinoa is now completely cooked, and you can tell that quinoa is cooked when it sort of separates, so you can see the curly bit that's on the outside. Rather than being the seed, it has detached and now there's like a translucent part and a little white curly bit. That's when you know it's cooked. This particular quinoa still has a bit of moisture in it, which is how I personally like it, but you can make it as dry or as moist as you like. I'm going to be storing this in the fridge and it tends to dry out after a couple of days, so I tend to leave a little bit more moisture in there, but it's totally up to your personal preference. Now I'm going to season this further, so I'm putting some chili paste in there, and then I'm also going to go ahead and add some minced garlic in there as well. This tends to go with most things that I like, so I like just having it with a bit of flavour to it in the fridge ready to go in some of my meals. I eat a lot of garlic, so it goes with most things, but you can really season this depending on what meal you're having. You could do Italian seasoning, or you could go ahead and do a chipotle lime or a Chilean lime or lemongrass. It really depends what food you're going to be eating. Then all I do is add it to a container and then I will store it in the refrigerator, and I can add it to lots of different recipes that I'm making that week, or I can just eat it as it is with a side dish of something else. It's really, really versatile. So yeah, that's how I make my quinoa. I hope that was helpful. Here are some recent examples of meals I've had with quinoa to give you a bit of inspiration. These are all taken from my Instagram, by the way, which is linked below, so you should go follow it if you're not already. The first one is a quinoa vegetable platter. The second one is a quinoa bowl with lots of veggies that were already in my fridge and some Greek yogurt. The third one is a tikka salad, which was actually posted as a recipe on my website. Then I mixed it with some scrambled eggs for breakfast, and the last one is a healthier version of a burrito bowl using quinoa instead of rice. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it answered your questions about quinoa. Maybe it will encourage you to try quinoa for the first time, or if you've already had quinoa, you might have a few other ideas of how you can use it in your cooking. If you do try it or you make anything, please use the hashtag that you can find here. I'll be able to find your Instagrams, give it a like and say hi to you, and they will also be showcased on my website. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any other foods that you are curious on how to cook, let me know and I'll do an episode just like this one in my Back to Basics series. But other than that, I will go now and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!